Hi, my name is Miriam, and this is the Black TV Show podcast. This is where I talk about my favorite TV show episodes, currently talking about season 2 of The Cosby Show. Welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 45, The Cosby Show season 2, episode 22, Theo's Holiday. This episode aired April 3rd, 1986. So we start off in the kitchen, and Theo comes down with Denise. And Denise asks, I need the money today. You owe me. You borrowed my money. And he's like, I promise. I'll pay you back today. The day is not over. And Denise says, you owe me $5. And then Vanessa's like, oh, he owes you money? He owes me $3. And Denise says, you owe everyone in this house money. And Theo's like, I don't owe everyone. And Rudy was like, you owe me a quarter. What does a quarter... When I heard her say that, I was like, what is a quarter going to do for you? I guess a quarter... Well, not even a quarter. I was thinking like the shopping carts, when you have to get the shopping carts. Where in Canada, they ask for loonies for that. And then parking nowadays, a quarter... I remember back in the day when a quarter would last you at least 15 to 30 minutes of parking. That a quarter only can now last you for less than 10 minutes. Okay, so who needs a quarter? But I understand, Rudy, when you're young, a quarter is a lot of money. So I understand how the fact that Theo can't even give her a quarter, that is crazy, so I feel bad for Rudy for having a quarter missing. And Theo says he's good for it, he'll get the money. And Denise was like, when? And Vanessa was like, I know, never. And Theo was like, so Theo asked Cliff, can he get an advance in his allowance? And Cliff was like, you're already backed up until your 50th birthday. And Claire says to Theo, you're developing a bad habit with your finance. We can tell. And she asks, what are you going to do once you get into the real world? You can't be owing money, people will not be very understanding. And Denise was like, yeah, the bank is not going to listen to your excuses. And Cliff says, your mother and your sister are right. We are your family. We love you. We let you borrow money even though you're not qualified to borrow it. And when you get to the real world, it's going to be way different than how we are helping you out, basically. Theo says when he goes into the real world, he will do just fine. He'll have lots of money. And Cliff was like, I hope you're not waiting for me to die, to inherit the money. And he's like, no, that's not it. He says he's going to earn it. He's going to be a model. Everyone starts laughing. They were like, a model? No, you can't be a model, in a way. That's basically how they're responding. And Rudy was like, I want my quarter now, okay? Because she doesn't believe that he's gonna be successful as a model. And Theo says, I'm being serious about it. I'm going to start modeling when I'm 18. And Claire says, oh, so you're going to be able to be on your own by the time you're 18? And he's like, yeah. As a model, I can make big money. And Cliff was like, yeah, but before you make the big money, you're going to make little money. And he will need, Theo will need apartments, and he will need all the things that he needs to be part of the real world. And Theo says, when the time comes, he will be ready. And so Theo leaves. He's going to Cockroach House for the night and says he'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. And Cliff asks everyone if they're going to be home at 10 a.m. And they're like, yeah. And Cliff was like, we're going to surprise Mr. Theo. Tomorrow, this house will become the real world. And I was like, when he said that and they show the shot of Claire, just like, yeah, I don't know, her face reaction, I was like, ooh, I like it. I don't know, it's weird. Every time I watch this episode, I always see her when she reacts. Felicia has that look, she has different looks, either when she's mad, when she's happy, when she understands. I love the looks that she gives you, And so, before we get into the real world, I'm gonna give you a list of the people that are who's playing parts that are not their actual character. Cliff is not gonna be Cliff. They'll be he's gonna be playing characters. So Cliff will be Harley Weewax, the landlord of the real world apartments, and also he'll be a husband of a young couple in Mrs. Griswold's Bank. Claire will be Millie Farquhar of Millie's Chuck Reagan restaurant. Amanda, and then she'll become Amanda of Amanda's Furniture City. And then she's going to be the wife of the young couple in the bank. Denise will be playing Mrs. Firestone at Firestone Modeling Agency. And then she's going to be playing Denise Farquhar, the waitress at Millie's restaurant, and also the daughter. And then there's Vanessa, who plays Margot Farnsworth, the tenant at the Real World's apartment. And then she's going to play Kitty LaRue, the Firestone receptionist. And she'll be playing Mrs. Covington as the vice president of Griswolds Bank. So Rudy is going to play Mrs. Griswold. She's the owner of the Real World, Millie's Firestone, Amanda's the bank, and the utility companies. She's just the owner of everything in New York City, basically. Like a 6-year-old can run all these businesses, right? You never know. They could be the one making all that money. A 6-year-old could be making all that money. Cockroach plays Holton W. Dansbury of Cockroach Oil. So it's the next day, and Theo comes home from Cockroach's house, and Vanessa's sitting on the steps, and he says hi to Vanessa, and she's like, I'm not Vanessa, I'm Margot Farnsworth, the tenant of the Real World. And she has an apartment in the building, and she knows Theo's coming, because the tenant told her that, a young man that's 18 is coming over here to rent the apartment. And, Theo's like, okay, you're pretending? And, he's, so confused. And so, and she tells him to ring the doorbell for the landlord to open the door. So he rings the doorbell, and Cliff opens the door, and he is Harley Weewax. He's the landlord of the Real World apartment. He gives Theo $200 that Theo's parents gave him to start off in the Real World. It's play money, but it is good there. And so then we see Claire come out of nowhere and says, and she's Millie Farquhar, the Millie's Chuck Reagan restaurant. And Theo says, good one, Mom. And she's like, who? And he was like, oh, Millie Farquhar. And so then Harley tells Theo that there's a few rules. The rent is due at the first of the month. No loud music played after 10 p.m. And no children. And so then all of a sudden Rudy comes down the stairs, and she's Mrs. Griswold, the owner of the Real World. And she just seems so busy. And Theo and Cliff. And so then Cliff says, this is Mrs. Griswold. She's nice, but she drinks heavily. Oh, a 6-year-old drinking heavily. What is she drinking heavily? Milk? So Theo and Cliff go upstairs, and Claire peeks out of the kitchen and asks Rudy, how did it go? And she's like, I was good. And so we go into Theo's room. There's nothing in the room. Everything is gone. The bed is gone. All his clothes is gone. Every little thing. The desk is gone. Everything. It is empty. And he was like, what did you do with my room? And Harley was like, this is an unfurnished apartment. This is how it was left when the last person was in here. And Theo was like, you destroyed my room. And so we find out that that room in particular costs $600 a month. This is 1986. So it seems very strange to me. It's $600. But then yet again, this is New York, and I believe they're in Brooklyn. $600 is a lot. Because nowadays, apartments are $1,000 and stuff. But I feel 10 years ago, they could have been $600 a month. So it's crazy to me how expensive that is. And so I do understand Theo's point, being like, how is it this expensive? And so Harley says, you came at, the timing is bad. If you had came in 1942, he would have had a whole house for $250. For me, working on a set, I can make $250 and even more within a day. So that would be amazing to find a place for only $250. Imagine if that was the cost right now, because for me, I just need to work one day on set, and I would be making more than that, and be able to buy a house. That would be amazing. But unfortunately, no, houses don't cost that anymore in 2021. They're so expensive. And so Theo says he'll take it. And then Harley says how old he is. And Theo was like, oh, I'm 18. And Harley was like, oh, no, we can't have 18-year-olds here. They party too much. And Theo was like, oh, no. I've been out on my own since 18. But I am actually 23 years old. And Harley says, oh, okay, that's fine. And so then Harley was like, I need first and last month's rent because in case he skips out early. I didn't know that's how it works, but that makes so much sense because if you can't afford to pay last month's rent, at least you have the money. So that's a good thing, I would say. And so then Theo says that's $1,200. And Harley was like, I need another $600 for the security deposit in case if something gets broken. And Theo was like, that's $1,800. And Harley was like, well, you add like a 23-year-old. And Harley says he can't take the money now because he needs references. Someone like an employer that can vouch for him, that he gives proof that he will pay the rent. And Theo was like, I'm going to pay it. I promise. And Harley was like, I cannot feed my family on a promise. And Harley asked, like, do you have an agent that can send a letter? And Theo was like, no. Do you know where one of an agency that I can go to? And Harley was like, yeah, we have an agency downstairs. You can just go down there and you'll find one. So Theo goes down the stairs to the living room, and we see Vanessa's in the living room, and she's the receptionist at Firestone. Her name is Kitty LaRue, and she asks, like, do you have an appointment, honey? So she asks, do you have an appointment? And the way she says is like, do you have an appointment, honey? And when you see Theo's face, he turns and he's like, huh? Honey? Like, so weird, right? But it's so funny the way that Theo, his reaction is from that. And so Kitty calls for Mrs. Firestone, who is played by Denise. She's for the Firestone modeling agency. And Kitty says that a gentleman needs an agent. Mrs. Firestone asks if he has any experience, and she was like, no, he doesn't have any experience, but he looks good. And so Mrs. Firestone decides to see Theo. And so Mrs. Firestone asks Theo, like, do you have any experience? And Theo was like, no, but I look good. And she was like, I'm gonna be the judge of that. So she asked him to pose as if there was different poses that she asked him to do. So she asked, like, pretend you're modeling leaning on a car. So he, like, leans. And then she asks, pretend that you just want a $10 million sweepstakes. And literally he's, like, jumping around. And I'm like, is that what a model does? Like, I don't know. That was just not model material to me. Like, because a model is, like, it's a still photo. So it was just like, yeah, that's not good. And then she asks, pretend that he's a new father holding his baby for the first time, and he's pretending he's like goo goo gaga, and Denise is like starts laughing. She's like, okay. And so she asked him for his pictures, and he's like, I don't have any pictures. And Mrs. Firestone says, you don't have any pictures, you're not gonna get any work. And he's going to need a good photographer and a set of prints, and that's going to cost him $800 to $1,200. And Theo asks, like, can I get a letter from you saying that I am working as a model? And she was like, that's dishonest. And she was like, I need to go call Paris. And so she leaves, and Theo tries to leave the house, and Harley's like, where are you going? And he's like, I'm going to get my reference. And he leaves, and Rudy comes in with a cookie, and Cliff tells Rudy, you're doing such a great job. And she's like, who? Because he said Rudy. He didn't say Mrs. Griswold. And so he was like, oh, Mrs. Griswold. And she's like, no problem, Harley. And we end Act 1 there, and we go into Act 2. So Cockroach comes in and dresses up in this nice suit. And he's, as we meet him, Horton W. Dansbury of Cockroach Oil, who is going to be the reference for Theo as he's his employer. And Theo says that, he's the spokesperson of Cockroach Oil. Because you remember, he said he's a model. So it's like, what does a model have to do with the oil? So that is the reason, because he's a spokesman for him. And Cockroach says he's the reason that Cockroach Oil is what it is today. And Harley says, okay, congratulations, you have the apartment. And Theo was like, he's super happy. He's like, and he thought this whole thing is over. And Harley was like, who? Because he said dad. And he's like, I need to talk to my dad. And so, can you find him for me? Basically, that's what Theo says. And he's like, okay. So Theo gets to see Cliff. And Cliff says, the real world doesn't stop for no one, but for you, it'll be 24 hours. His dad leaves and Harley comes back and tells Theo where the furniture store is, which is downstairs in the dining room set. So Harley says, oh, it's the furniture store is past Millie's restaurant. And Cockroach was like, who's Millie? And Theo says, oh, that's Mom. And Cockroach was like, oh my god, I love your family. Like, I wish my family did this. For me, I wouldn't. I would not want to be in this. I definitely wouldn't want to be in the situation as Theo. Maybe if I was in the situation of the sisters getting to act around like that, fine, but I can't. And so we meet Amanda. And so I feel like I can't do this justice. So I'm going to put the recording of this whole scene because Claire Huxtable, or I guess in the terms of Felicia Rashad, she does such amazing job being this saleswoman. Like, I would think that Felicia should work in sales. Honestly, Felicia could do anything she wants. She is a queen, okay? So take a listen.
Well, send them over.
Going over, boys.
Gentlemen, welcome to Amanda's Furniture City, where money talks and nobody walks. If you like it, you touch it. If you break it, you buy it. If you don't see it, we don't have it, but we will get it. Now, what can I do for you?
Finally, Theo's like frustrated, so he's like, Mom, and Cockroach was like, no, that's Amanda. And then Theo calls out Cockroach, and Cockroach was like, that's Mr. Dansbury to you. And so Amanda tells Cockroach like that you need to go to the bank and get a loan. And so Theo and Cockroach goes into the kitchen and we see Denise. And Cockroach says, oh, hi, Denise. And also mentions that he's hungry. So they decided to go in the fridge to get food. And Denise starts grabbing plates for them. And she asks, like, what did they get? They got, like, chicken and tuna and all this stuff. And so she's writing this all down as if, what a normal waitress would do. And she asked, like, do you want sodas? And they're like, yeah, for sure. And then she's like, it's $24.50 without tip. That is actually a lot of money for... I'm just trying to think reference here because this is 1986. Like, for, like... If I went to a restaurant, like, let's say if I went to Olive Garden, for myself, I would be able to get something for less than $24.50. But this is between them two, so it might be off by a little bit. But she even says without tip because she's expecting some tip. And so Theo was like, I thought you were Denise. And she was like, yeah, I'm Denise Farquhar, the waitress of Millie's restaurant and Millie's daughter. And Theo tells Cockroach to put down the food because he ain't paying for this unless Cockroach is going to pay. And Cockroach is like, you have the money. And Theo was like, no, I don't have the money. And so Denise takes all the food away. And Theo was like, I am on a budget. And so Cockroach asked for how much for the apple. And the apple was $1. And Theo was like... and so Cockroach was going to grab two, and Theo was like, no, we'll take one and split. And the split is to split it. It's 50 cents charge. You might as well get two apples. Why would you split one? Like, if you're hungry, you're hungry. Just spend an extra 50 cents, okay? It doesn't make sense in Theo's, but I understand Theo's under the gun because he's just like, I need to make it through this 24 hours, basically. But this is what the real world is all about. It's, this is what you got to deal with in the real life. And so then Cockroach says to Denise to keep the change, and Theo was like, what? Cockroach? Like, don't tell her to keep the change. So Denise leaves. And so Cockroach says, we could eat at my house. The food is free. And Theo was like, they started this and I'm going to finish it. So, like, he doesn't want to give up with this whole, the real world's life. And so we go into the living room and we see Claire and Cliff. They're playing a young couple, asking for a loan to buy their dream house and plan their family. And so the woman who is Vanessa goes to Mrs. Griswold to get their loan approved, and it's approved. And so they're so happy that they have it. And Claire tells Mrs. Griswold, "Thank you for the loan." And Mrs. Griswold is like, "If you need any more money, just call her." And Cliff is trying to say something, and Claire was like, no, stop. We gotta go. And so Vanessa was like, next. And Theo like tells Cliff, like, I can't do this with Vanessa. And like Vanessa says it again, next. And so Theo and Cockroach sit down with their apples. They're eating their apples. And Vanessa says, that she is Mrs. Covington, the vice president of Griswolds Bank, and she doesn't want them eating their apples in her office. But what are they going to do? Are they just going to throw it on the ground? Like, it's too late. They're in your office eating the apple. Let them finish the apple, okay? That doesn't make sense to me, you know? And so, Cockroach says, Theo works for me. My cockroach oil is at the top of the building, a 49-story building on 891 East 54th Street. Don't know what that means. I've been to New York, but I can't deal with like these numbers streets. I'm so used to having like name streets, like a name place, a name street, a name drive. Like this 54th Street, I can't. It confuses me. But I know when I talk to other people that live in cities that are like that, they're like, it's so much easier because you know which way you're going when you're driving and all that stuff. But I don't know, I'm not used to that. So I don't know where that is in New York. And so Mrs. Covington asks for a phone number. And he says he has no phone. And they was like, how do you have no phone? And Cockroach was like, she caught me off guard. Like, what am I supposed to do? And so Theo was like, hey, forget him. I need a loan for furniture and pictures from my modeling agency, and he needs $2,500. And he has never taken a loan before. And Mrs. Covington says, this doesn't look good. You got no credit history. Your boss has no phone. And Theo says, he promised he will pay it back. And Mrs. Covington was like, okay, well, I like giving young people a starting break. And so she said, I'm going to recommend for approval of the loan, but it has to go through Mrs. Griswold. And Theo was like, no, not Mrs. Griswold, because he knows how tough she is. And so it goes to Mrs. Griswold, and she's like, no. And Theo was like, why not? And she was like, because you have nothing. And so Mrs. Covington says, if you get a job and get some more money, you can come back and apply for a loan again. And so we end the scene right there, and it's nighttime, and Cliff and Claire are at the door, and Theo's on the ground in the dark, basically, because he has like a lamp, and there's no bed on the ground. Like, he's literally lying on the ground. And so Theo doesn't have electricity he rented the lamps from Cockroach, and he bought a stereo until he realized that he needed to spend $500. Utilities turned on. I'm sorry, I'm saying that so wrong. And he didn't realize that the electric company is owned by Mrs. Griswold. So he literally ran out of money. That's basically what he's saying. I was like, damn, so you are not succeeding in this real world. And you know what's crazy is, like, we had this kind of conversation literally in episode 1 of season 1, where, that whole economic lessons about, trying to figure out, financially how you can make it. So it's crazy how this topic has come back in this episode. Claire has brought food for him, and it is a bacon burger dog. And Theo says the real world is a lot tougher than he imagined, but he is tough too. And Claire's like, oh, okay, good. And so Theo says that he has everything he needs. And Cliff was like, that is strange, because with the money you had everything you need. But with the money we have, you like to live like the rich and famous. And Theo's like, yeah, kind of. That's basically what he is, right? But Theo says that, he learned that when he goes into the real world, he is not going to do any business with anyone in his family. And we end the episode right there. This was a great episode. This is an episode, I think this is the first one where majority of the characters of this episode are playing a different character. I don't know if that makes sense. So basically, they're not playing the character that they usually play. They're playing someone else. There are a few more episodes like this throughout the series. I've heard from some of these actors when they do interviews, they were saying their favorite episodes are the ones that they play a different character, not the character that they play throughout the whole series. They play a different one. They like those kind of characters because in a way that it opens up their creativity to be something else. Because when you're on a series, you get used to the character. You're like embodied in that character. And then when you decide to be a different character, you really have to put some creativity and energy into it. And I guess that's when it's the most fun. And so I've heard from interviews, I think from the Look Back reunion of the Cosby Show, I've heard that they said that these are their favorite episodes. And I remember in the Look Back episode where or the special, I remember when they're asking, like, where would the kids be now? And Felicia Rashad said that Rudy would be a owner of a bank, and they're because of this episode. We don't know. I kind of wish, like, hopefully one day I could talk to Keisha and be like, where do you think Rudy would be today? And find out what she would think. And so we had one guest star that has been on, I feel like now, like, is this the third episode that we've seen him? I've lost track. But we had Carl Anthony Payne as Cockroach. And fun fact here, in the original aired version of this episode, the last scene shows Theo sitting in the dark room with nothing but a sheet and a stereo after spending all of his real-world money. In later versions, the episode with Theo having a box dinner with his parents in a brightly lit room, Theo having purchased a lamp, mattress, and a few other items. Fun fact for you there. I didn't know that. Of course, when this originally aired, I was not born, so I wouldn't know. I kind of wish I could see what the original version looked like, because it cuts... Because I felt like there was another 2 minutes of the episode with that last scene. So I'm like, oh, so did they have a shorter episode? Or is there a different scene that was in the original version that now we don't see? I would love to see what it had looked like. So, but fun fact there, that's on IMDb that it said that about this episode. And then another fun fact is, Cliff wears a cap that says Magnum PI, referencing the Cosby Show surpassing Magnum PI as the #1 show on Thursday nights, eventually becoming the #1 show in prime time during the same season. So yeah, I had to like rewatch it and be like, oh, he is wearing a Magnum PI cap, which is weird because like then you're advertising a different show on your show. So I don't know if that's why would you do that, but I understand, like, because now he's saying our show is better than that show. And in season, I think it's season 8 or season 7, I can't remember. I can't say who the person is because the character hasn't come up yet in this season or in the series yet, but a person has a Simpson like mask because the war between the show The Simpsons and the Cosby Show in terms of ratings in season 8. So they tend to do these things where they try to be like, our show is better than the other show. I feel like I don't see that much nowadays, though. I see sometimes like where shows blend in with each other. They make a combined episode, like Scandal and How to Get Away with Murder. They had that together. They had Grey's Anatomy and I think Station 19 do an episode together. So nowadays I feel like a lot of shows work together, but I feel like back in the day they're like, we're individual, we're not part of that show, we want to be better than that show. So that's just my thoughts. So the lesson for this episode is, when going into the real world, don't do business with your family. I just took that from Theo. I'm not sure if later in my life would I do business with my family. I don't know. I would definitely, the money I would be making from the business, I would definitely keep my family financially good, but I'm not sure if I would work directly with them as business partners or they work for me and all this stuff. We'll see. We'll see what the future holds. And the question I have for you is, did you think, so when you were younger, before you became an adult, did you think that the real world would be easy? Let me know using the hashtag RealWorld on Twitter and Instagram at Black TV Shows Pod. I would love to hear from you. I know the real world was hard. It's going to be hard. So I didn't think it was easy. I know that for the fact. That was my point of view. But I want to hear from you guys. If you're listening to Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave a 5-star rating and a review. It will help this podcast grow bigger, getting a bigger audience, because I would love to start having some people to co-host with me. because sometimes, you don't want to hear me talk all the time. But I would love to have this podcast grow as much as possible. And I will see you all on the next episode, which is episode 46, The Cosby Show Season 2, episode 23, The Card Game. See you on the next one.